Yeah. Hello, my name is David, and my partner is Sean, and we'll be talking about how the media discussed Edward Snowden's leaks. So first off, who is Edward Snowden? He was born on June 21st, 1993 in North Carolina, and he was hired in 2013 to work at the NSA, which is the National Security Agency. He previously worked at the CIA and Dell. He tried he tried to raise ethical concerns but was ignored by the NSA. In May of 2013, he flew to Hong Kong after leaving the NSA, and that's where he revealed classified NSA documents to multiple journalists. So, a brief summary of what those documents revealed: they revealed that the NSA was able to get information from all telephone providers, which is huge. Prism, which was a program of the NSA, could request all the major tech companies for their data on their customers. That includes Google, Yahoo, Facebook, everything. So that's another big deal. The NSA was sharing data with and allowed the GCHQ, which is the British spy agencies, to tap into cables all over the world. The NSA had spies in foreign countries. The tool X Keyscore could allow them to see what anyone does on the internet. The NSA was cracking encryptions and compromising the security of the internet for those who use it. The NSA had elite hacking teams that did that. The NSA hacked and obtained data from Google and Yahoo without their permission. The NSA also collected all text messages from all cell phone providers. And finally, they also intercepted phone calls in the Bahamas and Afghanistan. All of this without revealing it to the public. So now we have the Wall Street Journal, which is considered a center source in regards to its bias. So this source is very focused on being informative and being public, having a publicity role. It mainly just wants to tell the reader what is happening with Edward Snowden and about the leaks and what is going on with him and his life after the leaks. So there's no speculative content or mainstream bias in this one, hardly any bias at all. But there is structural bias since the source focuses a bit on the ethics of Snowden's actions and a bit of opinions on whether if he was right or wrong to reveal those things. And it sometimes doesn't focus on the actions themselves. Now, The Guardian, which is a bit left leaning, not entirely left, just left leaning, this source acts with a lot of informative and platform role. That means it's trying to give Edward Snowden a voice. So they are for Snowden. They focus on spreading the word what Snowden thinks of the situation, so his own opinions. And then the sword has very light statement bias. It also really paints Snowden in a good light and sometimes agrees with his statement. So they outright just agree with the guy. So they are clearly for him.
All right, so our next source is the Washington Times, which tends to be leaning towards the right or the conservative side. So the source mainly had an educative role. So pretty much they were on a level that talked to the reader of the article about the main issues of this topic, and they were more of that than informing the citizen, which would be the informative role, but yet they minimally did. Um, the source out of all of them that we read has been the least biased, even though the Washington Times does tend to lead towards the right. They were not really picking a side, yet they were leaning towards the right by criticizing Snowden and his actions and not really, as David said, giving them a voice. So, and they were mostly focused on political biasness, as just mentioned. It does lean towards the right a little bit. So there's obviously that. And then corporate bias. Um, Pretty much this story was picked in the Washington Times because they are a right-leaning source. So that it was picked over other topics. And then the source focuses on the ethics and not the actions compared to other sources. They don't really talk about what Snowden did and just more on why what he did was wrong and how people think about his actions. And then some in-text evidence that we had about this was, uh, quoting just directly from the article, is a former senior U.S. intelligence official cited other puzzling aspects of Snowden's account. And we said that this showed that there was bias because um, the official was pretty much talking about how Snowden's actions were, as said, puzzling and uh, not really supporting the US and supporting other countries, such as Russia, is the one he moved to. Our next source is CNN, which, as many know, a very left source. And this article really does a good job of showing the informative role mainly, and a little bit of adversarial role, showing that the media is, in quotes, a watchdog, and the government is pretty much responsible for the public's interest. And they do this because they pretty much cover both sides of the issue and don't really go into depth on either side, even though CNN is more a left source. And there is, again, political bias because it is a left source, and there is ventriloquism, which pretty much that the people writing the article had said things that supported Snowden more than they didn't, and the government. And this pretty much is focused on the benefit of Snowden leaking the actions of the government and how he's pretty much doing the public a favor. And pretty much this article ultimately rules in favor of Snowden with the example below, which is directly from a text opinion, Snowden is a hero, and they link it to a different article, which shows that the author of this article is directly for Snowden. And then our last source is another very right one, is Fox News, and the source does a good job of showing the informative, such as or so does as does CNN, and it's kind of a publicity stunt mocking Snowden's actions, excuse me, uh, publicity role, not stunt, and it mocks Snowden's actions and what he did instead of focusing on why they were important, and it focuses on how Snowden's actions impacted the people. There is political bias, obviously, and a false balance is shown as they don't really talk about the side of Snowden and why what he did was maybe right, but they pretty much just degraded him and talked about why he was wrong. And generally, this article, the author of the article, does not feel that Snowden is innocent and does not trust his actions or his background or what he says. And pretty much direct evidence of this is the author states that Snowden was cleverly hiding his actions and painting himself as a victim of the US government instead of taking responsibility for his actions. And then next part is about the bias that's presented in the article, our perception and the stakeholder perception. So most bias was to pursue the source's personal goals and to please the regular readers, as does many media sources, which is how media works a lot these days. They do not talk about more the informative part, but more the political side, which was mentioned on how pretty much every article had a political bias to it. And the right was more against Snowden, while the left supported him and, in quotes, claimed him as a hero, which was supported in quite a few articles, mainly being CNN and Fox. And then depending on which source was read, the reader would have a varying opinion on Snowden and his ideals, as each source pretty much had a false balance and did not talk about the other side as much, uh, with the exception of probably 2 out of 5 of the sources. The other 3 did talk mainly about one side and did not talk about the other side's actions. And then we, the people, are the stakeholders, which is probably the main point of this topic, and which could lead and ultimately does this event does cause the people to see the government a different way and give people a negative connotation of our government overall.
And finally, the takeaways we have over media and how it portrayed this particular event. So the media shown here can be very manipulative and will always have some sort of bias. Even the center source has some little bias. Bias is unavoidable. Some medias and news sources have more than others, and that's when we have to be careful about it. So moving on to that, from that, a main problem about the media as a whole is that they primarily focus on opinions rather than facts. That bias is taking over and not representing the entire story to prove their point. and further their own agenda. And how this affects democracy is that democracy through the media is very fragile, and often the people do not get the full story. And that can definitely affect it when the people are coming down to making their own decisions. And since there are two different sides arguing for different things, the people aren't sure which to trust, which to not trust. So inevitably, it leads to confusion. And that's something the media, and that's why the media is so important in our democracy and our government. Thank you so much for listening.